In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, may peace and blessing be upon our Prophet Muhammad and those who follow him in goodness. Today, we have one of our brothers, Sh Talhah, one of our beloved brothers here in our community, who is well known in the city of Philadelphia as he was the Imam in Graterford State Prison for a number of years. And we'll get into that and some of the questions during this interview. We would like to sit down with Sh Talhah today and speak about something from your background and your upbringing, and likewise your incarceration, and mainly from the things that we would like to discuss, the role that the Muslims in the Islamic community played within the prison system, and how Islam led to the betterment of the Muslims inside the prison system and likewise outside of the prison system. And what role did adhering to orthodox Islam, the Quran and Sunnah, what role did that play in the prison systems? How that came about? These are some of the things we would like to discuss, inshallah ta'ala, and these questions with you, inshallah ta'ala, Sheikh. So, starting off, Sh Talhah, could you give us a brief background on yourself and where you grew up here in the city of Philadelphia?
Bismillah. I grew up in the part of Philadelphia called South Philadelphia in the year 1956, October 7th. In the household of a mother and a grandmother with a brother and a sister. In my early days, my sister died, and that left just me and my brother.
Okay.
I went to elementary school, a public school, and then junior high school to a period, and then I got locked up for this case, or the case during the period of my 9th grade.
Okay, we're going to get to that shit. Okay.
And that environment in which I came up was an environment that was strongly influenced by neighborhood gangs, as I would say.
Okay.
But at the same time, there were a lot of what you would say nationalist movement, black nationalist movements coming into their own. And the most prevalent or the most prominent were the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party.
Okay.
Right, along with some / portions of Morris Americans.
Okay.
In that particular area in which I came in South Philadelphia.
Okay.
But it was dominated by the Nation of Islam in that area of South Philadelphia.
Okay. Sheikh, you mentioned that you grew up in a gang war era. At that time, obviously there were a lot of killings, especially among the youth. A lot of people went to prison. You yourself, Sheikh, went to prison at a very young age, and I believe it was the age of 16. Is that correct? And you were ultimately given a life sentence without parole.
Correct.
Could you tell us about that?
What happened during that era, I got involved and got caught up in it, and eventually wound up being involved in a murder case and getting a sentence of life without parole in 7.5 to 15 years following. And by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it played a part in my development when I became a prisoner and coming to Islam.
And I'm sure that was a hard situation on your family, your mother, your aunts and things like that. That was a hard thing for them.
Oh, no doubt. What it did in many cases, it basically destroyed my family unit because the impact that it had on my relatives. One thing about coming up in that era, the families was very strong and loving one another. And at that time, I was young, baby, basically the youngest of the family. So it took a great toll on my mother and grandmother particularly, where it affected their health. And in many terms, sometimes you would think that maybe your actions had an impact where it may have possibly destroyed them physically.
Sh Talhah, I want to back up just a bit. You mentioned in the 1960s and 1970s, along with the presence of numerous gangs in Philadelphia and throughout the U.S., period. Like, for example, New York, Detroit, Chicago, LA, there were numerous gangs. Due to the racial climate, there were those movements that attracted young African-American men, in particular, and women, such as the Black Panther Party, as you mentioned, the Moorish Science Temple, the Nation of Islam. Here in Philadelphia, the Nation of Islam, they had a strong foothold. My question to you is, were you ever part of the Nation of Islam?
No, I never was part of the Nation of Islam. I was dedicated to the gang that I was part of. I was part of that gang from the age of 9 to about 16. See, so my loyalty was blindly to that. You know, so I never even had an inkling of being part of anything else. You know, I bled and lived for that gang.
Wow.
You know.
So Sheikh, you were incarcerated at the age of 16, right? That was a very young age, of course. Did you go to an adult prison or did you go to a juvenile prison?
I went to adult prison.
Right away?
Yes. Yes.
And at that time, were you Muslim yet? Or if not, when did you embrace Islam?
I wasn't Muslim then, because I got locked up at 16. I wasn't Muslim. But I became Muslim at 17 in prison when I accepted Islam.
So basically about a year after you were incarcerated.
I was incarcerated, right. A brother came that was a Sunni Muslim on the block I was on in prison.
What prison was this, Sheikh?
This is the House of Correction.
Okay, Philadelphia.
Philadelphia House of Correction.
Okay.
And he used to talk about 3 or 4 of us. We was on a block with about 125, 30 guys. Basically juveniles, with the age 16 to 17, tried as adults, right? But we was in the adult prison. But they had just had that block for the certified or tried as adult juveniles.
Right.
And he used to talk to us about Islam, Sunni Islam, right?
What was his name?
His name was Moose, but his name was also Hassan.
Okay.
Right? And Hassan Abdul Aziz, right? And you know, we wound up taking Shahada because he talked about Allah Ta'ala. And I knew, you know, I always had this connect with this feeling that, you know, what he was saying, the Orthodox Muslims, because they used to call them Orthodox, Sunnis, they used to call them Orthodox Muslims, which meant at that time the real ones.
So, because in prison you had the nation, and then you had the Orthodox. You had the Orthodox
Muslims, right?
So, as for the Sunni Muslim, they would call them Orthodox Muslims.
Call them Orthodox
okay,
Muslims,
I got you.
The phrase that they used was saying they're the real ones.
Okay.
Right, the correct ones, right?
Wow, that's deep. So they were saying that even back then.
Yes, it wasn't that many of them.
Right.
Probably because when we took Shahada on a juvenile block, it was like 3, 4 of us, right? Out of about 125 other, you know, juveniles.
Right.
And in the jail, which had other blocks, adults, probably was only about 6 adult Sunni Muslims. Because we used to meet them on the gate. You know, they would try to give us written hadiths and written and phonetics, written surahs and stuff. We trying to get our Islam together because, you know, at that time, Islam wasn't strong as it became years later.
And what year was this?
This is 1974.
74, okay.
Over the House of Correction.
Okay.
Right? It wasn't strong. I'm talking about Sunni Islam.
Right.
And the Nation Islam, it was like about 50, 60 of them.
They had numbers.
They had numbers.
Okay.
Right, this only House of Correction. See, so the older brothers would bring us little hadiths, right, pass it off to us in phonetics, some verses of Quran in phonetics, and we be trying to learn it, you know, from there, right? But the information wasn't as vast as it was, you know. And those that did have a book or two, somebody might have a biography of the Prophet Sallallahu, right? It might be one of them in the whole prison, right? And it was precious. They wouldn't even let it get out of their hands. They wouldn't even share it.
It's not like today when you can just go to a bookstore and it's a lot of information now. It wasn't like that in the 70s.
Somebody will write it, a page down, an issue, and pass it to the blog, and we get it and share it.
Right.
Right? You know, it was real deep. Right?
So you gotta be grateful in this
Oh,
time.
man, it was, you know, it was, and if the Quran, there was one Quran there, and it didn't leave their block.
Wow.
We didn't see it. Right? Wow. We didn't see it.
That's amazing, because compare that to now where, you know, for example, here at the Dawah Center, we have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of Qur'ans to give out and to be donated and things like that. And in the early 70s, you know, just to have one Qur'an was something very precious. It's the translation of the Noble Qur'an, or having Sahih Bukhari.
Very precious, right?
Very interesting.
Very precious, right? You know, like I said, they would write down some verses in the Qur'an and give it to us.
So clearly, Sheikh, like you mentioned, the Sunni or the Orthodox Muslims, they were outnumbered in those early days. Was there any ever friction? Any friction or animosity due to the Sunni Orthodox Muslims practicing the religion, worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without any partners, believing only in Prophet Muhammad and Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because we can't forget, Sheikh, that the Nation of Islam, they had Malcolm killed. When Allah bestowed upon Malcolm the correct Islam, and he exposed the matters of the Nation of Islam, their matters of heresies, their matters of disbelief, eventually he had Malcolm killed. So was there any animosity between, the nation and the Sunni Muslims during those days?
No doubt. Right, because you have to remember the origins of their belief system was kufr and shirk. They believed that God came in the person of this man, Master Fard Muhammad, and they believed that Elijah Muhammad was a prophet and a messenger. See, so the foundations, the origins of their belief system was definitely based on shirk and kufr. And the origins of Sunni Islam was based on Tawheed. Even though they may have not characterized it, everybody understood that Allah Azza wa Jalla was the sole creator, provider, sustainer. Everybody understood that only Allah Azza wa Jalla should be sent without worship. Everybody understood Allah Azza wa Jalla's names and attributes. That's why when you look at Sunni Muslims of old, you will see their name systems is they got names of prophets, hoods, Musa, Ayub. You got names of prophets, names of the companions, names of the Tabi'in. And you could see their names. Kareem Abdul Aziz, Sayyid Abdul Ala, Hood Abdul Khabir. We had the attributes. So all that was understood. And the shirk and the kufr of the Nation of Islam was understood. So that was the friction and the animosity. And the mere fact that they used to call us spirit worshippers and camel riders.
Wow.
Because all the way back then, we were wearing garb, Islamic garb. See, so they would say that we was worshiping the religion of the Arabs.
You mean you in jail, you guys were wearing thobes?
We were wearing thobes. We don't wear thobes and kufi from the early 70s.
Okay.
My first thobe, I got that, alhamdulillah, I finally got that was 1977. And I never ceased wearing it until I came home. See, and that was the problems that we had when the animosity and the conflict would be. We would call them mukmuks, right? And worshippers of the mothership, because they were talking that madness about the mothership.
Right.
But the animosity about them having a prophet and messenger, as they call Elijah Muhammad, that was a very tense situation. Not just missing the shirt that they was into.
So based on that, were there any actual cases of physical transgression where they tried to harm the Sunni Muslims?
There was quite a few incidents.
And was this in the state prison? Was this still in the local county prisons?
State and county.
Okay.
State, real delicate, because at that time the Sunni Muslims become a formidable opponent for them because the numbers begin to grow. Example, in Graterford, during the period of one of our elders, Sheikh Saeed and Hood and them, they gave dawah where they began to build a community to about 80, 90 of them. However, the Nation of Islam was like 400 plus. Right, 400 plus. So they always outnumbered us.
Right.
However, there were incidences where somebody from the Nation of Islam tried to harm or stab another Sunni Muslim. And it almost exploded. However, the leadership was always able to curtail a catastrophe. Now, there have been certain circumstances where there almost was some serious catastrophes. But by the permission of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the brothers that was in the leadership and administration was able to curtail it. But that animosity even came all the way when they changed the Walid Muhammad all the way down, to be honest, to when I come home. They could, because a classic example, when we was up Graterford, we came together because we always had different ears all the way until 1995.
Right.
Meaning
the people Sunnah, they had an Eid.
We had an Eid. Wallace Muhammad boys had an Eid. The Qadianis had an Eid. Or the Shia had an Eid. Or you had different groups. The most Americans had a great Eid. We would never have no Eid with them. Right. So they always had that. But 1995.
For those who do not know, that Eid is the celebration
of
breaking the fast on
breaking the fast or the sacrifice of our beloved Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail.
Yes.
Right. See, so we always did things differently, right? However, around 1995, they tried to bring us together, and they forced us together to have the Eid, right? And it was always animosity, because now you're talking about not only Nation Islam, not only Wasi Muhammad followers, not only Shia, the Qadianis, you're talking about the Sufis.
When you say they forced us to be together, you mean that
administration.
Was the administration of the prison,
they put us in the area together,
right?
And that was very tense,
right?
Because you have the Sunnis or the Salafis in one area sitting together, the Qadianis in their area, the Sufi in their area, and say in the Brothers of Wasi Muhammad community in their area, the Habashis in their area, the Sufi in their area, but we're in one big space like the auditorium,
right,
or the gym,
right.
It was a big space, right, and the tension is there. Everybody looking at one another, alhamdulillah.
So Sheikh Talhah, as it relates to the literature that you guys had in the prison system in the early days, the Islamic Sunni orthodox literature, what books did you guys have in the beginning, and when did that literature start to increase on a large scale as far as the Sunni Salafi literature?
Well, first, I remember we got Muslim Khan's translated to Sahih Bukhari in 1976.
Okay.
And then eventually the books of Tawheed began to come, and the books of fiqh by the people of the Sunnah, and it begins to grow, inshallah ta'ala. So that's when it became very crucial in spreading the dawah to Islam all through the state, right? Because we were able to get those books. Our people began to translate those books and put them in English, which was a hindrance at one time.
Right.
Because when you look at the history of the prisons, you will see that the methads was in flooding the jails with their methad books.
Right.
Waka distribution books out of Turkey, Hilmet Isik books, Endless Bliss books, Sufia, Hanafi, the South Africa ulama books, and all these things. And there really wasn't a way to really combat them except by the knowledge that we had of being on the hawk. And we used to always say, we can't wait for our people to begin to translate those books. And then they begin to translate them in the 80s and the 90s, and we started getting them. And that was alhamdulillah, because now we were able to spread our dawah. Right. And what we did, we set up a program where at that particular time, and particularly when I'm at Graterford, they had a classification center where they began to send prisoners all across the state. But we would have them for 1 year.
They would come to Graterford first, and they would stay there
for 1 year.
For a year, okay.
And the way that it was structured in Graterford, that any Muslim that was registered, or I should say, came into prison as a Muslim, they had the right to come down to the Masjid from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8:30 at night.
Right.
See, so we had classes every day because we understand the crucial part of getting this dawah out.
Right. So
we would teach them brothers the basics of Islam, go over with the books of Tawheed, the books of Aqidah Wasatiyah. We would go with them over the Seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu, the books of fiqh, and we would work with them for a year. And whatever prison they went to, we stay in contact with them.
So in other words, these books, Sheikh, the books of Hadith, and before that, for example, the Noble Quran, the books of Hadith such as Sahih Bukhari, the books on Aqidah al-Wasatiyah, I believe you guys got Explanation of the Creed, Sheikh Abu Talhah, those different type of books.
Yeah.
These books, they allow the Muslims to become grounded in the correct Islamic belief system. And especially like you said, during the time you had the people of staunch madhahibs, for example, you had Shia there in the prison system. You had different groups. So these books allowed you guys to solidify the foundation and the Aqidah of the Muslimin as a protection, as a weapon against those deviant beliefs.
Now, what it did was it allowed us a platform to be able to push the dawah.
Alhamdulillah.
Right? And by pushing the dawah through these books were so authentic and it was so powerful that those other books couldn't stand up against them. The books of the Sunni path and the Methads, they didn't have no legs to stand on. We crushed it.
Right. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. But we set up a very intricate system. Right? At that time, they were building new prisons. The late 80s and 90s, they were building new prisons. And they were sending people there. And as I said, Graterford was a major classification prison. So we would have Abdul Salam go there and over there. And the brothers, when they would come with us for a year, and after we taught them, it was a training period, we called it. Because the ideal goal was in 1986, when the Sunnis were weak, we said that we must make the Quran and Sunnah dominate. See, so by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a system came into place where we were able to spread the dawah all across the states of Pennsylvania, right? And that's, that was one of the, the goals that we sought after to do.
Sheikh, now I want to pivot to something else, another matter, and that is, in the 70s, I believe it was, a monumental ruling was passed as it relates to the Jumu'ah services in the prison systems. This didn't only affect Graterford, it affected many other states. Can you discuss how that came about, Sheikh?
Well, the history of Jumu'ah in Graterford, Pennsylvania, started in 1972 with Masjid Sajda. At that time, Sheikh Saeed was the man. And they had a brother that worked in the chapel area named Ishmael. He was the clerk. So when they began to organize the Islamic community, that's the first time the Islamic community began to organize in 1972. They used to go downstairs, sneak downstairs and had classes. Ishmael had the key. He would let them in downstairs under the earth and ready for them. Therefore, for the classes, they would have a Jew. And they had a Catholic preacher. He knew what was going on. So he would keep the door open and let us go down. So around the end of 1972, now September, October, it becomes to be more established and accepted by the prison when they would let the brothers go down. Then the brothers contacted one of the Islamic centers in Washington, D.C. And one of the brothers came, and that sort of like officially allowed the jail to accept the Sunni Muslims.
So you mean an outside volunteer came and he gave the Jumu'ah khutbah?
No, he didn't come, he just came.
Okay.
Right, to acknowledge it, because they always want an outside coordinated acknowledgement.
Okay, I understand.
So from that moment, Jumu'ah was recognized by Graterford and other prisons. However, it was not legal, put on the policy nor by the legal system.
Okay.
So it went on from 72 to the late 70s when Brotherhood became the Imam Sheikh Hood.
Okay.
Brother named Zebi Musa and Brother Ahmed and the brothers in Sajda. They put together a lawsuit to try to secure Jumu'ah just in case the prison system wanted to take it back because it wasn't policy nor was it legal. So they put a lawsuit in and they won the lawsuit, out of court settlement, where the institution began in Pennsylvania, not only Pennsylvania, Delaware, Jersey, and other places.
So it had a ripple effect to other states
because of the federal lawsuit.
So that came as far as it being a something required by law. It was started from the brothers, like you said, Sheikh Hood, Brother Musa Zebi, Allah, and some other brothers. Okay.
They brought the laws, it became law. And they got the legal aspect of having the two Jummahs, having the Jummahs, the two Eids, Ramadan, Kufis, legally thobes, even though they allowed us to wear them, right? Oils, incense, and being able to have guests come in for the Eids. That was part of it. See, so what we did, we had the brothers who come in, right? Along with a few other things, but it became legal, it came in the books. And with that, part of the ruling too was any member that was part of Masjid Sajda that came into the institution of Graterford, when the prison was open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8:30 at night, all they had to do was get a pass from the CO on the block and they could come there anytime.
That's Sheikh.
It opens the prisons up.
Now, while we're on that topic, because you mentioned a few times Masjid Sajda. Now, from what I understand, in Graterford, it wasn't just one masjid. You had a few masjids in Graterford. So can you tell us about that? How was Masjid Sajda established? Who named it Masjid Sajda? How was it established? And can you tell me the difference between Masjid Sajda, which you were a part of, right, and the different masjids that were there in Graterford?
Well, generally you had 3 masjids. Originally for 1972 it was only 2. Masjid Sajda and Qadiani Masjid, which was next to the room next to it. They sort of faded out around the middle of the late 70s. In 77, 78, members of the Muhammad community eventually came downstairs and built their masjid. So that became 3. That building the Qadianis had, when they faded out, the Shia came and took it over. With the Khomeini movement in 1979. A couple of Sunni Muslims and other people postulated with the Shias. So they started that. But at the same time, Germantown or the Sufis had a room upstairs in the school building, along with the Morse Americans. Then the Qadianis resurfaced again, and then the Habashis. See, so there were several groups in Graterford, but there was only 3 masjids. But they gave them rooms because they had outside coordinators.
And out of all those groups, what was the dominant da'wah there?
The dominant da'wah became the da'wah of the Salafi. By the mercy of Allah Jalla. We began to dominate everything, right? Because we had the haqq. But there were problems between us and all of them. Because as is known, whenever the haqq comes, everybody on falsehood comes together and unite against it.
That's right.
See, so it was very trying times.
And Sheikh, lastly, who are the influential ulama, scholars, that the people of Sunnah would listen to, read their books, refer back to?
Oh, no doubt. Sheikh Mubdil, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Sheikh bin Baz, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Sheikh Al-Albani.
So even back then in the 80s, you all knew about Sheikh Al-Albani, Rahimahullah,
No.
Sheikh bin Baz,
No.
Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Muqbil, from the four senior scholars of our time. You guys, you knew about these scholars, and you held these scholars in a high station because they were, and the scholars are the heirs of the prophets, as Masjid said.
Ain't no doubt. Anybody that came through Graterford prison from the 80s and 90s, 2000s, can tell you, Masjid the Salafis held high the scholars, those 4 scholars. Matter of fact, it was so deep that the people in certain masjids, some of the brothers in Wadi Muhammad Masjid, and others, they used to call us Sheikh worshippers of Arabs across seas.
That's strange that we just heard these same statements today. Wow.
Anybody that ever came through Graterford from the 80s and 90s can tell you, whether they would Sunni Islam or bin Baz or whatever, they can tell you that they used to call Masjid Sajjah worshippers of scholars, Arab scholars across seas. They used to call us that, right? Used to say we was trying to be like the Arabs. Everything. We went through that whole phase. That's why I'm amazed how people.
They say they couldn't come and wide. Every people have those who come and inherit their statements and stuff like that. Because again, 2022, we still see these same statements and people attacking the people of Sunnah. Sheikh, you mentioned the presence of different groups there in Graterford State Prison, different groups of the Muslims. From them were the Wallace D. Muhammad followers, or W.D. Muhammad followers. What was the point of contention between that group and the Salafis, the people of the Sunnah? Or in other words, why would they label the people of Sunnah with these labels? Your Sheikh worshippers, or your worshippers of Arab sheikhs, or the different labels that they would label the people of Sunnah. What was the point of contention? What would you say that this stemmed from?
Well, 2 points that I can think of: the nationalism in them, and the mere fact that they hadn't surrendered to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And that was the problem, right? The refusal of the 7 hadiths from our Prophet ﷺ. They had a bay'ah or allegiance with Wallace Muhammad. Right? That was their leader.
And not to interrupt you, Sheikh, and I remember one of the statements that I actually read from W.D. Muhammad. He said, if you want to be in this group, I'm gonna tell you right now, we don't accept all the hadith.
Yeah.
He actually stated this. The leader of Wallace Muhammad. This is one of the statements that he made. He said the hadith, they cause too much trouble for the people. So this is from his statements. Sorry to interrupt.
See, so that was the problem. Then one time he was talking about starting his own method.
Right.
See, so that was another problem. See, but their allegiance, their how can I put this correctly? Their loyalty was to Wallace D. Muhammad. And as they know, they say they have a bay'ah with it. Therefore, the conflict between the Salaf and them is that we have loyalty to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have obedience to what the Messenger of Allah some say. See, so there was a conflict. You know, if you classic example, I was dealing with one of the brothers in 1988 in regards to this, and he did it in a sarcastic way. He said, "You mean to tell me if I cut my beard and I leave my pants beyond my ankles, I can go to hellfire?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, show me it in the Quran." So I took him to the verse where Allah Ta'ala said, "Whoever obeys the messenger obeys the Lord." That's right. I told him disobeying the messenger is like disobeying Allah Ta'ala, and you can go to hellfire for it.
Right. Now we'll be learning for that to usul فَأَصَافِرُ عَنْ الرَّسُولِ فَأَخَذْنَاهُ أَخْذًا وَبِيلًا.
See, so alhamdulillah, here's the beautiful thing of it. The guy eventually accepted the Dawah to Salafi a couple of years later.
Alhamdulillah.
You know, and I know him. He's on.
Alhamdulillah. So it wasn't anything personal between, but it was issues of religion.
It was always religion.
Right.
It was always religion. Our thing was always religious, right? Because that's all we had. Our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our obedience of found the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was our salvation, with the understanding of the noble companions.
And at the same time, Sheikh, you gave you guys gave that community dawah as well.
We always try to give them dawah.
Right?
We always try to give them dawah. Alhamdulillah, a lot of them was coming over. Right, but a lot of them still had that loyalty to the Wa'ad Muhammad. Right.
So Sheikh Talhah, we spoke about Masjid Sajda, the role that it played for the Muslims, and even I hear from some of the Muslims that have come home, my brothers, Binky Bilal, Mujahid, Maldonado, our brother Abdul Kabir, other brothers, they would say they would stay in the Masjid all day, you know, from the morning to the evening. We had to go back doing count, but they would stay in the Masjid all day. We hear stories of some brothers, for example, that were diligent, for example, in worship, ibadah, diligent in seeking knowledge in the prison within the prison. What are some of the things that led up to this, having this strong sense of tadeyyun, of practicing the religion, wanting to draw close to Allah? Because in a city like Philadelphia, you had a lot of, and you would know better than me, you had a lot of people who were hardened criminals. They were hardened criminals. People had murder, and people had all different, maybe multiple murders and different things like that. And they came through, and you raised a lot of them, Sheikh, and you called a lot of them to the religion. What are some of the things that led up to this strong sense of religiosity and wanting to cling on to Quran and Sunnah amongst these brothers?
That's a good question. The way I can explain it is that holding fast to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet to understand the companions. That was the blueprint in which we lived our lives by. And therefore, taking their example was an example that the community began to implement. We began to stay together, we did things together. We was nurtured and cultivated on Quran, Sunnah, understanding the Sahabas, the books of the scholars. And we interchanged this example with one another. We were closer than our own blood brothers because by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they learned what brotherhood was through the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, which is key, right? In sincerity, ikhlas. Right? Sincerity is key to everything, right? When you're around the right people, and they're good, upright people, it affects you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most truthful people. He said the person who's religion their friend is a fact. Be careful who you take as your friends, is a fact. Because if you're around the right people, doing the right things, people is going to eventually take from that. They're going to become a part of it. It's going to encourage them to do what is right and what is correct. But if you're around the wrong people, they're just going to lead you around the path of misguidance or sin. See, so what we did was we formulated a brotherhood based on the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. See, the Prophet ﷺ meant something to us. He was our leader. The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the book in which we followed. If somebody said Allah Azza wa Jalla said something, everybody got quiet. If somebody said Rasulullah said something, everybody quiet. No one ever pulls a book of Allah Ta'ala or Sunnah in our presence. we would not tolerate it, right? Everybody understood the role of the companions. We had a class where you had to learn the biography of the companions.
Very important.
We encouraged people to take the names of the companions, but knowing who the companions was when you took that name, and we would test them. And we understood the role of the early man. See, because that's the salvation to the Ummah.
Sheikh, in 2012, there was a Supreme Court case, Miller versus Alabama. And the Supreme Court ruled that sentencing juveniles under the age of 18 to life without the possibility of parole was unconstitutional. And in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, they had the most juvenile lifers in the country. By the permission of Allah, this ruling affected you, Sheikh. Could you discuss that in brief?
Yes, it definitely affected me. Alhamdulillah, when it came down, when they were ruling on the case, it went up there. Me and a couple of brothers that, alhamdulillah, are home now that can verify it. We were walking the yard, and I told them they were worried about the decision when they're going up there. I said, Allah Ta'ala answered my dua. We come home, right? And Allah Ta'ala did answer my dua. And some of them, Akil Abdul Kareem, they could tell you today, I said this before they even ruled on it. And that's how I look at it, and that's what I believe. Allah Ta'ala answered my dua. And non-Muslims and everybody else that was juvenile lifers came along with the ride. But my Lord Most High brought me home. Right? And that's because we made Qiyam al-Layl and try to do the things that our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam directed us to do in seeking the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And I remember when you came down to court for resentencing to the 13th and Filbert, and the courtroom was packed. You know, the courtroom was packed. Your family was there. A lot of companions that you had in prison. A lot of people who love you out in the streets. And it was an amazing thing. It was an amazing feeling, alhamdulillah. And she resentenced you, and I was there to witness that. Alhamdulillah. Sh Talhah, another question. We're going to wrap up in a bit, but you know, I'm sure on the inside, while you were incarcerated before you came home, I believe, but 2017, right? But I'm sure you hear different things regarding the dawah outside of prison, and perhaps you may find misinformation about what goes on in some of the masajid and the condition of the dawah outside on the streets and things like that. So since you've been home since going on 5 years, walillah alhamd, you've been to the Salafi Masajid, not only in Philadelphia, but outside of Philadelphia. Alhamdulillah, you teach in Masjid Sunni Islam, you teach the new Shahada class. Alhamdulillah, you attend Masjid bin Baz. Likewise, you've attended Masjid Muhammad al-Wahhab in Camden. And you've been outside of Philadelphia as well. You've been to Masjid Rahma in Newark and perhaps other places. So what is your take, Sheikh, on the condition of Da'wah to Salafiyya on the outside in your experience?
Da'wah to Salafiyya is strong. It's moving. Right? I mean, it's unstoppable. This is Allah Ta'ala's da'wah. And can't nobody stop it. You can see the fruits of the labors of the brothers of the calling to the da'wah to Salafi in the communities. Right? And it's strong. But as Islam gets strong, as the da'wah gets strong, the test is going to get strong. You know, so everything that comes with the strengthening of the da'wah is going to be the opposition to the da'wah. And that's always been the history of it. See, it makes us who we are. The call us to the way of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his old companions, right? And those that follow them. This is part of the struggle of the da'wah. But it's strong. And it's hated because it's strong. The truth is always hated because it's strong. But in order for the truth to exist, it must be alive. So we're going to always have opposition. But as long as we hold fast to the book of Allah Ta'ala, the Sunnah of his noble Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, with the understanding of the Sahabas and the Salaf, we're going to be victorious. So we don't have to worry about nothing.
The last question, Sh Talhah, I'd like to ask you is that we find brothers such as yourself and many other brothers who've been incarcerated, and they've come home and they're living positive lives. You know, they're adhering to the Quran and the Sunnah. They're many have made positive contributions to their communities here in Philadelphia and other places. And at the same time, you find other individuals who may have come home and they reoffend and they go back to prison. They come out here, they may commit crimes, or they may do certain things that'll lead them back to prison. So, in your opinion, Sh Talhah, what are the reasons for individuals to come out and stay grounded in this religion, and to stay out here and be positive, contribute positively to their society and to the community? And what are the reasons for them to regress and return to prison? What would you say about this, Sheikh?
That's a very hard question, right? Because it all goes back to the individual, right? The individual has to understand that Islam is not only religion, it's a way of life. See, so you have entered into the life of Islam, meaning to live your life according to the Quran and the Sunnah, right, to the best of your ability. See, so that's going to direct you to be around the people that live that lifestyle as well. And you're going to strengthen one another when you're around people with like minds. Therefore, you have to be part of the community that's following the way of the Prophet and his companions. Because this is going to enhance and strengthen your faith as well as your practice and your consistency with Islam. And when the tests and the trials come, the brothers that you're around, the Masjid that you're part of, is going to be instrumental in stabilizing you. But if you're not connected to the brothers, the correct brothers, the people Quran or Sunnah, that understand the Sahabas, you're not functioning in the community, being a part of the community, giving and taking from the community, when the tests come, you're going to waver. Also, which is very important too, when we come into Islam, we must fully come into Islam. And we must try to part ways with that criminal element or those criminals that have a tendency to try to pull us to the bad part of life.
Into the religion and wholeheartedly,
that's the key. Okay. I remember a very important thing. I seen the brother and I was on my way home. And he was struggling. And he said, I see you still holding firm. I said, definitely. He said, but how? I told him, if I didn't believe in Allah Ta'ala's religion and the way he followed his Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, I wouldn't be a part of it. He said, wow, you make it so simple. I said, it is, brother. It's about your commitment and putting all your sincere effort to the best of your abilities to follow the book of Allah Ta'ala and the Sunnah. Because that's going to make you be around the people of the Sunnah. Come back to the Masjid. You know?
Sheikh, there's a narrative out there, and I think this is important, where some people, they try to say that the people that's committing crimes in this city, they're Muslims, or Muslims, this is a religion that encourages committing crimes, or it's the Muslims perpetrating the crimes in this city. What would you say to those who make these type of statements, or what would be the response?
Well, I don't agree with that statement because some Muslims may be involved in crime and non-Muslims involved in crime.
Absolutely.
That's just how it goes. Crime is crime, not whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. A criminal is a criminal. Don't blame Islam for the actions of a person. It's not the deen, it's the person. They don't blame other religions. Why would you blame Islam? Islam is not held accountable for what somebody that may have claimed to believe in Allah Ta'ala and his noble Prophet Sallallahu does. It's not accountable. That individual is accountable for his own self.
Right.
However, is an element in the society that attracts his people to the evil. And they do evil. As we said earlier, I believe, in order for the truth to exist, there must be a lie. In order for evil to exist, there must be good. The people have to make their choices. The Quran and the Sunnah directs you to the best choice. That's the choice of salvation. If they're Muslims, then they should embrace Islam and live the life of Islam and be around the people of Islam. Because that's going to benefit.
All right, Sheikh, I know I said that was the last question before, but I have a bonus question, if you will. and I believe this is important for the viewers and the listeners to hear and to know, and it's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He favored you after you came home with a trip out of the country, and that trip was to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Sheikh, could you give us, can you talk about your experience when Allah allows you to make that trip to Umrah?
I mean, when I was away, I always asked Allah to invite me to His house. Right? That was one of the things that I ever wanted to do. I never wanted to go nowhere else. Muslims want to go here, there, and there. I always wanted to go to the land of Tawheed, to the house of Allah. Right? That was one of the part of my du'as. When we went over Saudi Arabia, and alhamdulillah, and we performed the Umrah, that was one of the pinnacles of my act of worship in my life. And when we was making the tawaf around the Kaaba, and we were circumambulating about several times, me and the brothers was going around, walking. And boy, I wish I could kiss the stone, just looking at it, but I couldn't get to it. But one of the most beautiful things that I seen as we was walking third or fourth time around the Kaaba, there was a Muslim, had no legs. He was going around the Kaaba just with his arms. And I looked at him, and I could see the sheer determination and the sheer eagerness to go around that Kaaba. But when you look in his eyes, you see the pleasure of worship. And that just blew my mind. I knew I was right place, and I knew my Lord invited me to His house. And as I said, that was one of the most high points of my act of ibadah at this point. When my Lord Most High invited me to His house and allowed me to go around His house, to go through Safa and Marwa, to go through the rituals of the Hajj. You know, then we went to Medina, and alhamdulillah, we went to the Prophet's Masjid, and we prayed, we broke fast, and inshallah ta'ala, we were there during late morning after we did Tarawih prayer, and me and about 10 brothers that believe like I believe, practice like I believe, and see Islam through the same eyes that I see it, we were there discussing where we were at. And I mentioned to the brothers, do y'all know where we just come from? The brother said, yes, making the great prayer, breaking the fast. I said, it's more to it than that. They said, what is it? I said, we came from the Masjid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, where he taught, where he prayed, where he fasted, where he taught Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, where Abu Bakr as-Siddiq taught, where Umar taught, where the companions prayed and worshiped, where Imam Malik was in the Prophet sallallahu Masjid, and he said anyone can be refuted or accepted except him, meaning the Prophet sallallahu pointing in the direction of his grave. With Bin Baz, with Sheikh Al-Albani, with Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, and all the ulama before us prayed, worshiped, and came. I felt as if I was a part of that ummah now, part of the Salaf, physically. And that was another apex of my life. I met some of the ulama, I sat in their dawses, you know, and I seen the beauty of them being the inheritors of the prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me to see Islam at its best.
Alhamdulillah, Shaykh, we appreciate your time. I benefited from the interview. I'm sure the listeners, the viewers, they'll benefit as well. And in reality, you know, alhamdulillah, for example, we have the statement of Allah in His book, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. Verily, this Quran, it leads to that which is most just and most upright. So this is in reality the thamarat and the fruits holding fast to the Quran. And likewise, like the statement of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, "Inni tarikun fikum shay'ain, in tamassaktum bihima lan tadillu ba'di." Verily, I'm leaving you with two matters that if you hold on to them, you won't go astray after me. Kitabullah wa sunnati, the book of Allah, my sunnah. So we see that those who come home and they hold firm to these two things, these two foundations, the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the understanding of the Sahaba, we see the growth of these individuals, the positive growth. We see the positive contributions to their community. We see them, contributing to the community with goodness and things like that. And we see that they remain loyal to the Sunnah, and they remain loyal to the people of the Sunnah, and that's in opposition to, for example, those who leave off this path, leave off the path of the Quran and Sunnah and the understanding of the Salaf Salih, and they can compromise these principles that they learned for whether it's wealth or for fame or for social media followers and things like that. So this path that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you and us and the Muslims firm upon this path. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to misguide our hearts after He has guided us and bestowed upon His guidance. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Wahhab. He's the one who bestows. He's the one who gives and bestows goodness. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.